Welcome to the Face to Face podcast, your go to resource for living a life of vitality, wholeness, and authenticity. I am one of your hosts, Melinda Wilson.
And I'm your other host, Kathy Little. Join us as we explore deeper connection, lasting freedom, and meaningful relationships with God, others, and your true self. Let's dive in.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 181. If you're a first-time listener, welcome to the Face to Face podcast. We're so glad you're here. And before I introduce our next remarkable guest, Kathy, just share a little bit about how people could be involved.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on. Our main goal is to help people heal, and we do that in a number of ways. But one of the big ways is that if you're looking for any training or more experience with the Immanuel approach, or even getting more trauma informed, we've got some courses at the Immanuel Institute that we'd love for you to check out. You can just go to immanuelinstitute.com. Level 1 trainings, very introductory for the Immanuel approach, good for everybody, just to improve your life in general and building attachment with Jesus. And that is our level 1 course. You can just click on courses and get information about that. And we have a run coming in April and May. We're currently running some students in the program right now, but April and May, you're going to have another opportunity to take part of that. And then if you want to just get some more trauma training and understand trauma, we actually created a course. It's got 8 different modules, self-paced, completely online, do it at your own timing, but it's called Understanding Trauma. And it brings together key voices in the trauma-informed arena to bring all of that into one space. So you get a taste of all of these different things, like what trauma is, how it affects the brain, the body, your relationships, your relationship with Jesus, polyvagal theory, attachment theory, understanding about like the brain science pieces behind the Immanuel approach in general is something that you can also learn in there to find out why it works so effectively. So we'd love for you to take part in that. If you'd like, again, immanuelinstitute.com, click on courses.
Yeah, thank you. And highly recommended. We've had some great feedback from both courses, actually, from the level 1 as well as the trauma module. And we're very community, we're a network. And so there's support there. You're doing the trauma module by yourself, but actually we are part of we're a network as well. And so there's community and support there for you if you so desire. But I'm really excited to introduce our next guest, who's a personal friend to me and to Kathy. His name is Jason Twombly. He calls himself a Heartsmith. He primarily works with guys, with men, as a spiritual development coach. He's also a lead trainer with Luke 10. But his passion is to help men transform their pain into power. These are his words: hurt into healing and wounds into wisdom, so they can reclaim peace and power in every area of life. And so this episode really does talk about men and their journey of healing, but this can apply to anybody. But it's really exciting to know that there's a resource for guys specifically, and he works with men. And so we highly recommend him. Take a listen to this. We're so glad to introduce Jason Twombly. Welcome, Jason Twombly. Welcome. We're so glad to have you.
It's fun. I get requests a lot from people that want to promote people to be guests on podcasts. And for Melinda and I, we want to have people we know or are recommended by people we know. That's kind of a policy we've gone on, rather than just somebody pitching somebody through the website. But this is actually an opportunity to interview truly someone we have relationship with, that we consider friend, I consider brother. So it's really fun to have you, Jason. I'm really glad that you were willing to come on. I know we've been talking about it for like 2 years, but finally get you on.
Just glad to be here. When the podcast is ready, the interview will appear. So perfect time.
There you go.
Well, we're going to talk all about pickleball. I mean, actually, Jason is like an almost expert. What level of pickleball player would you put yourself at, Jason?
It's, let's say, intermediate. We're still learning.
Okay. I don't believe that, man. Last time I played you, it was really bad. It was really bad.
There's always areas for growth. But I have a new pickleball shirt where Jesus is playing pickleball.
Oh, how fun!
So I should have been wearing that. So when I wear that, the anointing is fierce.
Awesome. That's what I've been missing then. I need to wear a shirt with Jesus playing pickleball. I'm sure I can find that on tshirt.com or something. Or maybe that's your side hustle, Jason. Yeah, find the anointing to play pickleball help a sister out.
I'll have to send you a shirt.
That's funny.
Well, we could skate on surface stuff for about 2 minutes, Jason, because I know you well enough to know that, and I know myself well enough, and how our conversations go on this podcast, that it's certainly fun to be at the surface, and then we dive deep pretty quick, and then we can come back up to the surface because we got to have some levity, with that. But really love what you're doing, Jason, with guys especially, and how you're helping them connect with their heart. And maybe there's different language because, for a woman, I think that can be sort of easy to understand, but even for women, it's hard. But just give us a picture about how you help men connect with your hearts and how that even got started.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I was a pastor for a number of years, and discipleship looked like a particular way of doing things. And for the most part, it was left brain didactic. And let me tell you everything I learned from Charles Spurgeon, the Puritans, and the 10,000 books that I own. And so it resulted in little to no lasting, sustainable heart transformation. And so for me, it was really working with guys in New York for a period of time where we did some different kind of discipleship. I called it a fight club. And so I can't tell you the rules of Fight Club, I'm sure you understand. But I would have people drive in from different states, and we would do this for a while in person. Then COVID hit, so then I went online. And I just found that for most men, they could be so given to the primacy of the intellect, theology, and all these sorts of things. But when their feet hit the ground on Monday morning, they could look at a verse like, "Don't be anxious for nothing," but their knees and their legs are tremoring because of the anxiety and the depression they haven't worked through. And there was a gap between what was being promoted and what was being practiced. And so I wanted to develop a way to help men take their nervous system to catch up with their theology. And so I do the work of a Heartsmith, and I help men out of the cranium and into the body, because I think the whole idea of the incarnation is to live an intentional life. And so I work with guys who suppress, repress, make fun of, belittle, or demonize emotions. And I'll just land it here by saying, taking even the work of, Dr. Jim Wilder, whom we've had on the podcast, I like to say that our emotional pacing is so important that our spiritual pacing can't outpace our emotional health. And I think the emotional health is the infrastructure for living with a life of solid and stable infrastructure that can help a man be grounded. Because guys are powerful, but a guy that's not grounded, like electricity, if electricity isn't grounded, he's dangerous. So I help men become emotionally safe. So that's some of the work that I'm doing.
Wow, emotionally safe. How easy is that, Jay? How difficult? How easy? Because you think about safety in relationships in general. I mean, that's a great word. So when you're thinking about that in the context of men, like, I don't know if we have time to unpack that. I know we're early in the podcast, but I'm curious just to hear more about that particular piece.
Yeah, if men are unaware of their internal landscape, they'll continue to transmit their pain onto those closest to them. And so unless they find a pain processing pathway, they'll go ahead and throw their grenades and bleed on the people that never cut them. So it's really important for them to begin the work. And it's challenging because there are guys that it feels like I'm speaking Arabic to a dog when I talk about emotional regulation, not living reactive or living responsive. So it is challenging, but I really like doing it. And I can get a guy in person or on Zoom who's never felt a feeling. And primarily it's the cave we fear to enter holds the treasure that we seek. So I created a program called Man Cave, and I help guys realize emotions are data, not directives. So a lot of times guys are so afraid of entering into that emotion. It's not because guys don't feel. I think they feel really deeply. Just no one has helped them navigate the labyrinth of their inner world. And so I help them surf their emotions, to identify them, name them, to tame them, so that you can surf through the emotions of life and not have the wave collapse on you. So it's hard to do for sure on your own, but with a really good guide, you can really transform your world, and it'll help you become that safe man.
Well, Jason, how did you become that good guide? I mean, does this come naturally to you? Or perhaps you can share a story with us where maybe you realized you weren't connected to your heart, or you realized you weren't as self aware as you would like. But just tell us a little bit, back up a little bit, and share your story of how your own inner heart transformation came to be. Because you couldn't be doing this, right, as a guide unless you had done that, obviously. So we'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, for me as an Enneagram 4, I feel deeply. And so growing up in a real wonderful Christian background, I always had God present. I was aware of my union with Christ as like a 3, 4, 5 year old. It was amazing. But going through life, I was never shown what to do with my big emotions. And so after a while, because they were so intense, I didn't know how to deal with anger, conflict management, didn't know how to regulate. Then I would just either play sports angrily, or I would just go into my head. And so after a while, I realized connection was everything. And I was really not as mature I was in some of the relational skills I'm teaching now. And as I went through the world as a missionary and a pastor and all these sorts of things, I realized there was maturity lacking inside of me. And I had to unlearn the things I learned growing up, as how to avoid being a narcissistic conversationalist, right? And learn the skills of gentle curiosity and to listen and to be present. So all of that happened. But I would just say that the culmination of all of this was a deep moment of grief in my life in 2012. And I found that grief was the gateway to crack myself wide open. And a lot of the work I do with men, I call man grief. And a lot of men are not shown what to do with all kinds of grief. Might happen to do with loss, but there's losses of many kinds. And so I find grief to be probably the most transformative of all human emotions. And as the poets say, grief is love with nowhere to land. And I've been trying to navigate where to land those places of love in my life. And so I help men through the different gates of grief. And they don't even know what it is, but it's in their body. And so through different modalities, I found I needed to transform my personal pain into peace and power. Otherwise, I would have stayed arrested in my development.
How did you even realize that you were? Because I mean, it, there's a whole show called Arrested Development, and it's kind of on that. You see the immaturity of these these grown people, but how did you even come to realize, or what awakened in you to realize that you had arrested development? Because that's something that you have to even be aware that you need help like that. What brought you into the awareness of needing to really do that work?
Feedback and the ability to listen. And so after a while, you ever wake up one day and everyone's a jerk? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it's not everybody. It's like that kind of a principle. So it was really becoming honest enough with a humble reckoning to look at the man in the mirror and to really do the shadow work, looking at those places that I didn't like about myself, of lies and labels that people put on me, to go into those places in self-attunement, putting the light on. And the light's always been on in there, but doing so from a non-harsh and judgmental way, and just listening to the feedback of other people in my life, whether it's a partner, whether it's kids, whether it's a review of some kind. And I would listen to the criticism and say, well, yeah, I think that's true. And I need to do something about that. Whether it's people pleasing or seeing familiar landscapes over and over again, and this pain has been there for a long time. Well, I need to get free from this. And that's the work of following a trigger, which is a gift to find out where you're unhealed and unfree. And so I was paying attention to that feedback on the outside and the triggers on the inside, where memorizing scripture like Rain Man, you don't want to play Bible Jeopardy with me, wasn't helping. It wasn't helping anything. And so there was a lot of things that I had to unlearn. In other words, I had to become a practitioner
Mm.
and put in the reps to be skillful at what it means to be a man, to be a Christ follower. And it was all done in the practice and not just in thought.
Yeah, Jason, I would think that being able to listen to feedback and respond to it in a way where you realize, hey, this is something I need to deal with, it's a hard step to get to, because it's our nature
Yeah.
to defend ourselves and protect ourselves, and taking feedback like that is difficult to hear. And I imagine it would require a measure of humility to even go there.
Mhm. Yeah, you really need that that level of just staying low to do that. And I help men with how I've been mentored, and I've learned to do this on the outside with people because I could do it on the inside in the family inside of my heart, right? If you think of IFS or internal family systems, I've learned to be gracious with my protectors, my guardians, those parts of me that were locked in at 8 years old or 22 years old. So my devotions, right about now, historically, I'd be in Leviticus, just plowing through,
Mm.
plowing through, plowing through. My quiet times, if like even this morning, I was in a devotional bliss just a few moments ago, getting ready for the podcast. I was paying attention to the parts of me that are operating. I did some breath work. I was reading some beautiful poetry just to ground myself. And so I do all of those kinds of things on the inside. So I spend time with myself differently so that I can show up more compassionate and attuning with people on the outside of me. So it starts here and then it will show up in my relationships.
Right. So excuse me, we're not talking about behavior modification, which I think that if we've kind of grown up in the church, we've learned these sets of rules. We've learned do not do this, do not do that, or please do this, or behave like this. And it's the rules, the set of rules that we need to live by instead of living from the heart and living from the inside. And really, those rules and behaviors break down after a while, right? If it's not genuine and authentically connected to the heart, the deepest places of the heart. And I think with men and women, I've seen this to be true for decades of, because I think it seems like, and you can unpack this a little bit if you wouldn't mind. People can be afraid to sit with their heart, and this is men and women. I've seen, obviously, you primarily work with men, but I've seen it with women too. There's a fear of, and I've in my own life, like, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit afraid to touch on that pain, and so how can we, or help us, trying to form a question, help us unpack or understand, first of all, why is it scary to look within? And then, secondly, how do we befriend what's within, even in our trepidation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my work with men, I'm finding, to borrow a phrase I heard recently, men are really great masters of concealment, masters at concealment. And there are those unprocessed, painful memories in our lives that we don't want to revisit. And it makes sense. It makes sense that we want to go there because they're really painful. And we think, oftentimes, even in male language, because we can feel big and strong, and society says don't get angry, you can't do this, or I don't want to be weak, anxiety is going to make me weak. And so when we're not paying attention to the dashboard that's lighting up on the car of our soul, the whole thing's going to get hijacked. And so I really help guys through the body somatically to enter into those places with a guide, with safety, through secure attachment. Because a lot of times guys think, well, if I go back to that fearful memory or that fierce conversation I won't have with my partner, I might get trapped there. If I get trapped there, I can't Navy SEAL it, stoic my way through my job and be functional. And so the very thing that they're avoiding is the place that they need to go to, because whatever you bury rules you. And so when we go into the cave that we fear to enter, there's more power that we're missing. There's more peace that we're missing, because as the brain communicates to the body a little bit, but the body communicates way much more to the brain. And when we slow down, we listen to those signals and we can transmute whatever emotion is trying to give us information. And it's not hard to do, because you're not going to get trapped in an emotion for a really long time when you have a certain guide to do that. And so it's really, really important not to suppress, repress, all of these kinds of things, because men who aren't aware of what's going on inside of them are often clueless to what's going on around them.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, how can we know we interpret outside through a lens that's actually skewed because we are not even having a lens to look within. And I'm so passionate about that, but I know that it's not always easy to look within. But David in the Psalms prayed this more than once of search my heart, shed your light on my heart. Basically, I interpret it into my own language. And then Jesus saying, don't look at the speck in your brother's eye. I think that that's kind of similar too, when you have this log in your eye. And what do you think makes it difficult or challenging for people to look at the log in there? And I know we talked about humility, but what have you seen blocking men from being able to actually go within when their whole world may be falling apart outside externally?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And probably my next podcast, I was just musing on it today, is going to probably address that, and how I really see Jesus as a second half of life teacher. Richard Rohr talks about that in his book, Falling Upwards. And so a lot of men in the first half of their life, and it's not a biological term, it all has to do with maturity. So the first half of life is all about building identity, which is crucial. It's about getting ego and just finding your place in this world, ego strength, and finding your roles. Really, there's a lot of clarity, certainty, rules for belonging and boundaries. Who am I? How do I succeed? And there's a lot of men who are raised that way. And it's important in development: law, structure, tribe, certainty. But the second half of life is, and I think Jesus, as you mentioned him, meets us in the first half of life, and at the same time invites us into the second half. And the second half is all about unlearning. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Surrender, integration, doing this sort of shadow work, not just saying, I'm a new creation. Let me read the next book, go to the next conference. No, there's more to that. It's holding paradox and mystery. It's who am I in the second half of life beyond my roles? It's more of love and mercy, wisdom and union. And so I think that Jesus dismantles this ego-based identity. Unless you lose your life, you cannot find it. Death before resurrection, identity before achievement or status. And even those in the second half of life, I'm finding, can piss off people in the first half of life, or even the first half of Christianity, because even Jesus will show up and relativize rules without discarding its meaning. He'll say, you've heard it said, but I say, the Sabbath was made for humans, but not humans for the Sabbath. The first half of life is obey to belong, that sense of the law. But the second half of life is love fulfills the law. And so I'll just say this. I think that he's not the teacher who helps you build a successful life. He's the teacher who helps you surrender the life you built so you can receive the one that's real.
That's so good, Jason. I have a feeling there's probably, I don't have any way of knowing who's listening to the podcast, if they're male or female. But I bet there's some guys listening, and they're hearing you, and they're thinking, I wonder if that's something I should consider looking into. And I'm wondering if you might have a message for the guys, because what I'm thinking is happening is there's probably a lot of women who are like, oh man, my husband or my boyfriend or my fiance needs that. Oh, they need that. They need that. They need. But how do you set this up to help a guy realize that he actually needs help? Because we don't often know we need help, because we bench ourselves against ourselves and we think that's normal. And then you have a contrasting viewpoint come in, or a contrasting standard, and you realize like, wow, that's not been healthy, and wow, this is really what I want. And but it usually takes something to get people to realize that they need help. So what are some things that you might do to help, maybe help someone assess or maybe be aware of, hey, I've got a problem, this would be helpful to fix?
Yeah, that's a great question. For guys that are running out of steam in one line, in one way of looking at things, their ambition is gone. They have no more fire. They're just burnt out. And so, if anyone is listening that's in that boat, I help guys find their passion again and their purpose. For those guys that have blown up their lives, whether something that's happened, it's a relational sort of thing. If people are living more catastrophic and reactive at small things, and they're paying attention to that feedback that they're getting, and they realize, wow, I'm beyond the edge. And so, for guys that are clearly stuck in their emotional development and they're lacking in their relational skills, that they come to me. Guys that are bumping up into the ceiling of their church experience but want more of God, those guys come to me as well. But it's mainly about relational maturity, healing, and yeah, I help guys transform their pain into power, their hurt into embodied healing, and wounds into wisdom. And so I never convince anyone to show up. So what I do is I just have a discovery call with them, and I bring them through a pretty robust assessment. And if they're finding difficulty in their relationships, in how they're reactive to life, or if they feel like they've been missing out on their life and just living like a drone over their life for all of these
Mm.
years, and they're never present with what's going on anymore, and they're just living as in the algorithms of just being a functionary, just living in their head because it's a safe place. They just seem to come to me. And so if anyone is interested, I'd be more than happy to have a discovery call, and all walks of life. And so I'm full right now, but I'll be having a new cohort opening up in the spring.
So, Jason, bringing it back to you, because it's always helpful to hear more of your story. And we're talking about all these incredibly powerful transformations. And I'm just wondering, Jason, what has this work that you've been doing with others changed in you? Or how has it changed you as a father, as a friend, as just a companion in life? Yeah, what change have you seen in your life doing this work with other guys?
Yeah, a lot of these programs are not just for them, but for me as well. And I realized that I can't live on an island by myself with a volleyball named Wilson and my Bible and do this work alone. So I need the men for empathetic witness, for accountability, for brotherhood. But when I show up, I'm not the facilitator or trainer that has it all together. And so I like to, from a place of safe, secure attachment, model vulnerability, because vulnerability outside of secure attachment always ends up in a train wreck. But because we've created this container of safety and emotional containment, I can share my story. And a lot of my story has been transformational through the emotion of grief. And here I could talk about it, but other places, my book, Jesus Comforts, is coming out next month, where it's a devotional from heartache to healing. And I talk a little bit more about my story. That's a little bit like Jesus calling. But for me, grief has been turned inside out because I haven't run from it. I dive right into the black tides of grief. And all that is just love finally finding its way home. And because I've walked through these different gates of grief, the father wound, mother wound, church wound, whatever it might be, the gates have been transformed in my life into pearly ones. And they're no longer places that haunt me, but they're sacred wounds that I can bring the oases of healing to others. And so, yeah, I show up in these spaces because I can't fake it.
Yeah.
I have to be authentic for every call, every man, not perfect, but really present and authentic, bringing to bear all of my stories. And I like to say we have a God who's not afraid of his scars. And so I like to present, what's appropriate at the right time, parts of my story in some of my groups. So it's really important to have those places where you could show up, talk about your shadows, failures, shame, and shortcomings with a group of guys that can hold space for you.
Can you just, excuse me, can you just, I love finding its way home. That landed with me, kind of highlighted. That sounds very beautiful. And I can, it affects me physically even. I'm like, whoa, that is, but, excuse me, to many, that could sound very ethereal and philosophical. Can you bring that into a grounded place? What does that mean, love finding its way home?
Yeah, I think it's Francis Weller in his book, The Wild Edge of Sorrow. He talks about these different gates. And he talks about the first gate is that everything we love, we will lose. And so I like to say that grief is love, that law has lost its landing place. And for me, it's just coming into that place of surrender and letting go of control. And, there are certain areas of my life that have not turned out the way that I thought Jesus and I thought it was going to be. And so instead of me just drowning in the sorrows of bereavement or pain or grief, I understand that anything that I held on to was never mine in the first place. And so it does sound a bit mystical for sure, but I've learned to nurture, and guys are not great at this, but those places inside of me that haven't known love, and whether it's from a father, a mother, or the church, I end up in my internal landscape giving the nurturing that I needed. It was never anyone's job to make me happy. But as I learned to father myself, I go ahead and talk to those younger versions of myself, bringing safety. So it's better felt than telt. But when I learn how to provide the guidance that I never received, I'm strengthening the ability for me to lead myself. And so I train men in self leadership. And so as I walk through these places of grief for myself, it shapes my emotional sovereignty. And as I, alchemize these places of loss, I wound up coming to love my neighbor as I love myself. And I think we can be skillful of what it looks like to hold secure love for others. So we're not looking through enemy mode, as Jim Wilder says. So I don't know if that makes it a little more grounded. But if I could give to myself and let go of all that I expected but didn't receive in life, there's something about going through the crucible of that journey that really, really brings healing. And if I avoid that, I find that carried weight of unhealed trauma will enter any relationship that I'm in. And so the deepest work of all is the work of becoming whole within myself. And I do that through loving myself just as God loves me.
Yeah, that's one thing that we're really wanting to stress in our spheres of influence with face to face and the Immanuel Institute is that piece of doing your own work and how important that is. And it's interesting how helpful it is to have somebody with you in the mix, somebody that's asking you good questions, somebody that's able to listen and attune. Now, I'm experiencing that, and really just having somebody sit with, validate, empathize, reflect back, helping you to get to that place where you have a little bit more clarity and goals, and it just kind of keeps you on track, and it is very helpful because the journey is never finished. No matter how much healing you've experienced, the journey is never finished. And so that is a big piece of that, is being able to be the best version of yourself so that you can impact those that you are serving from a place of more wholeness, integrity, authenticity, and to not fake it till you make it, but actually being fully present. And I know you do that, Jay, because I know you in life, and I know that you have a way of bringing empathy to the table, and presence to the table, and you're doing that out of your own space of work, your own space of hard that you've navigated. I know a lot of your story as well. So I really appreciate how you model that and how it bleeds into how you do life with friends. I mean, it's not just because you're stepping into something personal or professional with a guy that you're meeting with, but it bleeds into normal life. And that's what I want for me too, that the work that I do will bleed into how I treat friends and how I am in the world around me. So I really appreciate that about you, Jay, and that you're
Thank you.
emphasizing the importance of that.
I appreciate that because it just can't happen just momentarily. It has to become a lifestyle to be an integrated human,
Mm.
and I think that we experience that healing in relationship, and we're fortunate to have community in our area when we get together, and it's just a better way of humaning. I'm finding in this second half of life, it's more relaxed. It can be challenging, but it's kind of like in the second half of life, I no longer chase. I just allow myself to be found. I'm no longer addicted to certainty or control. And in surrender, in relationships with others, there's just a discovery in the slowing down to find the quiet wisdom of the body. And yeah, it's a really great journey. So I'm just fortunate to know the both of you.
Jason, can and I remember just meeting you the first time. I just thought, oh man, this guy I can go deep with really quick, and just started talking about heart stuff from the very beginning. And I've been wired like that from, I'm not a 4 on the
Yeah.
Enneagram, but it's close. It's a close score, but it's I say that I don't really care what number anyone is. Like, just walk as yourself, and I wonder if you could share with us, because I think people really like stories, and this kind of brings it into more of a realistic or illustrative example. But are you able to, maybe I should have asked you this before for for preparation, but you can take a minute to think about it. But can you tell us about a man that you've walked with whose transformation really affected you, and who really became more himself, and not somebody else, but it's like, I think the layers strip away, we become more ourselves. So is there someone that, obviously we're not talking names, but maybe just a transformation of someone that you witnessed really becoming himself?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole slew of guys. So maybe I'll just maybe do a mashup so that no one knows what I'm talking about. Yeah, my guys listen to these podcasts, so I'm trying not to use a
Yeah.
particular example. Um, but I would say that by and large, and I know stories are helpful, so I don't want to be too conceptual. But so much happens. What happens in man cave stays in man cave, so it's so super confidential. Even when I write my Substack articles, I have to just really be careful how I write things. I'm just finding guys that were controlled by particular brokennesses, trauma, or by different emotions, where they were just locked into one window of thought,
Mm,
one way of
mm,
being for so long, whether in rigidity or
mm.
chaos. Uh, it just blew up their lives, their marriages, their relationships, and the work that we do together often results in their wives saying, "Get on a call with
Mm.
Jason, get on a call right away, meet with him." And that happens because the guys are paying attention to their shadows, those places that they've been avoided for years. What's been burying them has been ruling them, and so there's been parts of them sabotaging their lives, driving the inner inside out. You think of the movie; they've just buried away their emotions like those marbles, and it's like they've been living with a stranger. And I think we all exist to walk each other home, and so I really help guys find the Father's house inside of them. And we slow down and go there, and they find that they can look into the mirror and see themselves for the very first time. And like I mentioned, they're not bleeding on those who cut them. And so it just shows up in relational growth, emotional attunement, and guys not hiding behind, porn, booze, the Bible,
Mm,
fill in the
mm,
blank, whatever it is, and guys showing up with their faces for the first time, so they actually can live face
mm.
to face because they've been obfuscated by the shadow and the veil. So that is surely not personal story. I'll have to work on getting that more specific.
Well, and just following to that, and I totally understand not being too specific, but thank you for giving us that mashup. And I'm wondering too. It leads me to wonder, what do you feel, or what have you witnessed in general, I guess, men protecting their hearts from? What are they? What do you feel? Is there a dominant sort of thing that they're afraid of, hiding behind these, the booze, the porn, the
Yeah.
Bible?
Yeah, they're hiding from men like to be competent. So men hide from inadequacy, which is, that shame part, and they want to show up and over index in strength, power, charisma, or personality. So they don't want to be seen as less than. So that shows up quite a bit. They don't want to be inadequate. So we work on inner significance. So I also am a meditation leader, and so I do meditations in my groups, and so we create the new soil of the heart. S is significance, O is oneness, I is innocence, and L is love. And so each of those actually point to one of the inner wounds that are there. So guys are either helpless, hopeless, powerless, or really feeling inadequate. And as we go through the layers of the heart, and there are many layers of crusted over beliefs, inherited systems, lies, and labels, there's the immortal diamond of the heart, the self energy underneath it. And as we get to that we find out who they really are. And that's where we do identity based habits and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the process of how we get there, so that men can become the kind of man that God sees when he looks at them. And then we live outwardly from that place, because underneath all of the storms, the mistakes, the failures, the torch of healing light is underneath all of that. And by meditating, we descend into the abyss of the heart to get there. And then there's healing from the inside out. So it's never from the answer is never out there per se, but it starts where Christ is inside.
Dude, I'm like, this isn't just for men, bro. I mean, I
Yeah.
love, I am doing a lot of centering prayer these days, going through Ignatian. I can talk about that with you later, but, and the more of the contemplative, but man, going within, that's it. It's not out there. And I love that you said abyss of the, but I do want to ask you to, maybe it's just personal, but the abyss of the heart. And the reason I'm asking you to unpack that a little bit, because that could almost feel scary, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to the abyss. And I was talking with a friend about this just yesterday, about the erroneous translation of the scripture that the heart is wicked, deceptively wicked, who can trust it. And I've heard it translated, probably, maybe, hopefully a little more appropriately, the heart is just so complex, who can understand it. Do you mind just sharing a little bit of your reflection on that, of going into the abyss of the heart?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the heart is the most powerful place inside of us. I think there's so many majestic places. I think even God wants to take us, that only the heart will enter, where the head can't fit. And so I think I train guys to live from a clear mind and a wild heart. And so I think the heart is a wild place. And so, as the container of emotions, I train men how to be emotionally competent and emotionally literate, so they learn the fluency of the heart. And so it can be scary if you go to Venezuela without a map, but if you have a map and a guide to show you the way, it's not as scary. And I heard this recently, that when you're lost, the best thing to do is to light a fire. And so when I have guys that are feeling lost, disoriented, and there are seasons of disorientation, we get in touch with their anger for the most part, because a lot of times anger is either blown up or suppressed. And we'll start with a very intelligent emotion. And from there, guys are truly afraid to go to the abyss of anger because it's so powerful. And a lot of times it's underneath underneath at me being pissed off at my dad when I was 13, but I never emotionally processed any of that. So it just built upon this resentment, upon this shame, upon this failure, upon this. And so going to the abyss of the heart, if it was easy, everyone would do it. So I agree with you. It is complex to go ahead and do that. But I find in some of the meditations I create just an elevator of safety, and we go down into these places with Father, Son, and Spirit, with the healing torch of light. And whenever we glimpse upon safety, true safety, we have a glimpse upon God, and God is there. And so, doing this sort of work, it can sound scary, but again, the crucible of healing is in the crucible of relationship, from Father, Son, and Spirit. We're wounded in community, we'll be healed in community. So, doing this with somebody can really go down into the abyss of the heart, but then transform it into a place where you might find 7 interior castles or places to go, and you can spend a lot of time there. And so I help guys really work with the gift of imagination, a sanctified imagination. And so the forest of the heart, where they thought if they went into the forest and got lost and eaten by wolves, it's not that scary when you go ahead and do this with someone else and stay with those memories, those emotions, and you can do that with the help of a guide. And yeah, it's the journey of a lifetime. I'll just say this: most guys can go ahead and hunt and run Ironmans and respect all of these sorts of things, and that's a level of bravery. But there's a new definition of bravery for a man that can look himself in the mirror and look at the forge of his own heart. And I like to say emotions are material and the relationships are the forge. But heat by itself, it can be dangerous. But heat in the forge turns into a hearth. And guys that can have the strength and the capacity, increased capacity to stay with those emotions no matter what comes their way, that's the kind of guy that I want in the fray with me. And those are the kinds of guys that we're developing with Heartsmith coaching.
So good, Jay. I'm so glad that you're doing this, and I know you've been kind of building over time and just written your book, and you have your own podcast, and it's so refreshing to see men like you stepping into this, because we're training Immanuel approach practitioners, and we have a couple of guys in the school, but the women far outweigh. And I don't know if it's just easier for women. I don't know, but man, we need guys to learn how to do this and to do it from that place of their own healing journey. So I'm really excited when I see somebody helping the guys come along. When I know you're connected with a network of men who are all kind of trying to figure out how can we get this stuff to more guys. And it is so profound and worth it. And yes, you're helping create really strong, solid, safe guys, and it's as much for the benefit of those around them as it is for within them, the getting to that place. So thanks for doing the work you're doing. It's amazing. I'm so excited to see this launching and getting more and more traction, and hopefully some people will listen today and reach out to you.
Thank you. Yeah, looking to. I don't call it therapy. I call it training, because guys won't show up. But we use some therapeutic modalities for sure. And yeah, looking for guys to do the work. A lot of guys. I like to. This is really true. A lot of guys are crying out for the healing, but they don't want the cure. And I know that because they'll go ahead and start the work or go through an assessment. They're like, "Whoa, I don't want to do that, man." The pain isn't that bad. And sometimes, okay, all right, and then they come back around. And yeah, we need some more guys doing this work. So yeah, I do train trainers with another organization, Luke 10, that I'm a part of. But I'm looking to train guys in this modality. So if anybody's interested to be trained as a coach, I'd be happy to have that conversation as well.
I highly recommend, Jason, anyone listening, to come alongside and be your coach and guide, and also any guys listening that want to join in. I know I can't say it as a man, but I can say it certainly as Jason being a friend and brother, and one who I've seen in person, that he's the real deal. And Jason, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, just wrapping up because we're about at an hour. But tell us, mention your book again, and then how people can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. The book's coming out hopefully March 7th, and it'll be sold at a great event with William Paul Young, your friend, and my publisher in Orlando. And so they'll be able to promote my book right there at that event.
Wow,
So I'm looking forward to
awesome. Are you going to be there?
that. So yeah. So yeah, I'll be there. There'll be a smaller meeting with Jason Clark and Paul Young, and then maybe a small group of us, and then the larger group the day after. So that'll be fun to engage in that. So the book is Jesus Comforts, and it's a devotional from heartache to healing. It's written in the style of Jesus Calling, and those are offerings that came to me and for me, but also through me. And so that'll be out soon. And you can find me at jasontwombly.com, where you find my podcast, The Heartsmith Coach on Substack. And I would love to jump on a discovery call and just have a conversation if this was really resonating with someone. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Honored to have you.
Yeah. So good to have you, Jay. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
I do hope if there are any men who have just listened to that they would reach out to Jason, even for that discovery call he just mentioned, because just meeting him and maybe kicking around some thoughts and ideas might help you get some clarity on direction moving forward. We're so grateful again to our friend for his time today, and hope you guys will check him out.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for joining us on the Face to Face podcast. For more resources and information, please visit facetofacenetwork.org.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review. It helps others discover tools for deeper connection and lasting freedom. We will see you next time.